I had a new video in the works and then I shot it twice, and each time I messed something up and just had to trash the whole thing. So I decided I was going to do a palette cleanser video instead and talk about a different genre, my general tips for how to play in a different genre. I don't think this is going to have as much appeal as the Screamo video I did way back because it's a little bit more niche, but I like mathcore, and I think I could probably point to some things that I've noticed over the years people tend to do in the genre. There might be some overlap kind of with what I covered in my Screamo tutorial video, and I'll link that below. But I think there's kind of enough to sort of talk about how you can change your approach if you're trying to get more into the kind of the mathier, the metalcore influenced territory of post-hardcore. To begin with, let's talk tuning. My main recommendation for tuning is probably to tune into a drop standard tuning, with the additional caveat that when you tune your two highest strings within a half step of each other, as in my highest string is only a half step higher than the string below it, then you can easily grab that diminished second tritone, and that is very common in mathcore. You're going to be doing that a lot probably. So I think it's a good idea to tune your two highest strings in that manner. And then, you're kind of standard in between your A string, what's conventionally your A string, and what's conventionally your B string. And I'm in the drop C standard right now. So that gives you some ability to play kind of like more traditional jazz shapes if you want as well. And then you got, your drop tuning on your lowest strings. And that is really helpful because it makes it just easy to grab those power chords. You're going to be doing a lot of neighbor tone movement with power chords, so I think it's helpful to have that drop tuning too. It can sometimes make some of the more like complex breakdown parts that you might hear in mathcore songs easy as well. So yeah, this is kind of, I think, my recommendation for a tuning to try if you're first getting into playing mathcore. I think this is a pretty good one. Again, this is drop C standard with the highest two strings tuned within a half step of each other. So in terms of like how you can start technique-wise, I think there's a few things that you want to pay attention to. I'll point out that right hand technique is really important in mathcore. You're going to want to learn how to do your pinch harmonics really well. You're going to want to learn how to like really dig in when you're picking. All of that is really going to make the music soar. The less convincingly you can fret and pick the notes, the less you're going to get all the sort of articulation that I think really makes the genre unique. And there's a lot of really unique guitar playing in mathcore. And then another thing you really want to pay attention to is just that you're writing in odd time signatures a lot of the time. That can be easier than you think it might be. Sometimes you just inadvertently messing around end up writing something and it's not quite in 4. What you need to do in that situation is resist the urge to try and move it into 4 and figure out a way to make it a little mathier. And if you find that you're having a hard time moving out of 4, I think one of my biggest recommendations is just to kind of like record some quick chugs to a click in a DAW and then cut it up and kind of move the chugs around so that you get something kind of unique that you wouldn't normally play. And sometimes you find that you can get something that's like nice and out of time and very syncopated and cool sounding, just kind of like moving those little chunks around, and then you can learn it on the guitar again and then turn that back into an actual stem. So in terms of mathcore, there's like a lot of overlap with metalcore. There's going to be a lot of like ripping scales and stuff that you're going to be playing. And there's also going to be kind of like a lot of big neighbor tones. I think the diminished second is probably the most important interval in the genre. The half step. Half steps are very critical. You're going to be doing half steps all over the place. And you're probably also going to be doing tritones all over the place. You're that interval, which is diminished from a power chord. You're going to be hearing those a lot as well. These are the two intervals that most people think of as being maybe kind of the most dissonant in a traditional harmonic sense, and they really grate on the ear. You can kind of play a lot with dissonance and still work within something of an identifiable harmonic framework when you're using these intervals a lot, which I think is really cool. Like, you don't entirely have to abandon harmonic motion, and you can still have like very discordant music, something that really pushes kind of the boundaries in terms of like what people are comfortable with listening to. So yeah, definitely don't forget to be like including those intervals in your music when you're writing. There's really kind of like no limits to what you can write in terms of like what you can put in a mathcore song. Like metalcore, and metal itself, there's a lot of fiddling and kind of like lower strings with like a kind of movement like that. And There's lots of chugging too, similar to our conversation about metalcore breakdowns. And yeah, I mean, like when you're working with chords into the situation too, don't forget to maybe try and include some of those tritones that we discussed in the chords. You can build a more pleasant chord and then try flatting the fifth or including a diminished second somewhere maybe higher in the range. And the good thing about the genre is that you can kind of look at math rock and progressive rock and metalcore as inspirations. It's maybe one of the most unlimited things that you can possibly play, and that's part of the reason why I honestly don't really have much to show you specifically in terms of techniques, because yeah, there's just so much that you can do, and like anything that applies to metal, like tremolo picking, for instance, or finger tapping, like all of that stuff can be worked into your average mathcore song too. One thing I've noticed in mathcore is that you can get a lot of like oblique motion too, like in your chord movement, maybe you've got your power chord, but then you get maybe a half step down. That happens in a lot of Every Time I Die songs, I feel like. Kind of adds a nice sort of like complexity to the harmonic motion that's going on. Yeah, I mean, my main recommendation would probably be to get like really good at practicing scales and get really familiar with kind of just like shredding, because I think it's a really shred heavy genre, and the more you can kind of like shred around and like really rip on the guitar, the more you're probably gonna be able to do things that people like to hear. It can be hard to learn this music by listening to it, because a lot of stuff can be mixed weird, or it's just like very technical. I've done a couple mathcore adjacent covers that I can link below that are kind of on the easier side of things if you're really curious about kind of how you can get into playing it and what some of the motifs you might hear are. Which reminds me that like you also maybe want to do lots of kind of like slides up. There's a lot of slides up in those covers, and I think that's also really common, kind of sliding up to notes, sliding down notes, sliding through chords and stuff. That is also very commonplace. These sort of glissandos are adding all sorts of harmonic complexity as well. So be sure to work lots of that in. And yeah, if you're playing mathcore, you're going to need a drummer who's really good. You're going to need all sorts of musicians who are really good. It's something you should probably get into playing once you've gotten really acclimated and comfortable with playing music, I guess what I would say traditional rock music. Knowing a little bit about jazz, knowing a little bit about composition in general, time signatures, stuff like that is probably really going to help you in this genre specifically. So I'll try and link some videos below that might be good resources for that specifically. And I wish you luck with it. There's probably like a lot of tutorials you can watch out there for how to play like specific bands and stuff. So go check them out, and good luck and have fun.